Right. So we just got inspired by our last conversation, and we're going to have a conversation all about conditioning and liberation from old programming and conditioning and patterns, and how they played out in our lives and how we recognize them, and basically how we kind of rewrote our script moving forward to create this new iteration of our lives.
Yeah.
Sound like I missed anything?
No, I think that's great. So I think for many of us, though, to be able to get to the root of the conditioning is to have curiosity and be willing to ask questions. A lot of times we have a lack of awareness that there is even conditioning that is running our programming. So, in your experience, how did you begin to start to become aware of the fact that some of the programs you were running were actually conditioned within you rather than being inherent to who you actually are?
I mean,
That's a difficult question.
yeah, because if I'm being honest, I think I always knew that I was like the good girl, and that's a whole thing. And I always was super well behaved, like did what I was supposed to, did what I was asked to.
Older child syndrome.
Very high achiever. Always had really good grades, did really well in whatever it was that I was trying to do. And so part of my identity was always that I was a good girl and that I followed the rules. And it honestly felt kind of like playing really small and almost like weenie-ish. If I'm being honest.
Such a weenie.
Like weenie-ish, because there's also, it's funny, like within me, there's also this like little bit of a rebellious streak too, where like I didn't want to do that, but I think what I had seen growing up was that the people who acted on that rebellious nature, when you're kids, you're not doing it in a way that's actually constructive. You're not doing it in a way where, say, like an artist or a visionary is creating art from this place of not wanting to fit into the confines of a box and just kind of like letting their imagination and creativity run wild. When you're a kid, what you see modeled to you is through school, where the kids who are being rebellious are the ones who are always getting in trouble and aren't doing very well in school, and they're always going to the principal's office and they're kind of a clown, or they just are making a mess of their lives. Or you see it modeled to you in movies where that person's, again, like always getting into trouble, or like later in their life they're ending up in a bad position, and it's like the one who's quiet and keeps their head down and like just does really well. That
It's almost the hero archetype.
Yeah, the one that's just like quiet, stays in their own lane, does their own thing, is like always trying to do really well, is the one who like exceeds later in life. And that was kind of what I tried to hold myself to, because I had that idea, but like deep down inside I never really liked it. Like it didn't feel great to me. It always felt like I was kind of, it was like there was always this undertone of like you're playing small.
You mean you didn't enjoy quelling your fire and dimming your light?
Exactly. And so yeah, there was always that part of me that was like, how what would it feel like to just like stretch my wings and like
Just
let
go for
it
it.
rip, like let it
Just
let
go for
myself
it.
be free.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I've always been aware that there was that aspect of me and the good girl, and always being very obedient and very high achieving and fitting a certain box.
Well, where you were the good girl, I was the good boy.
Mm-hmm.
Very much
Oh
so.
yeah.
Even good boy until I was in
Yeah.
my 30s.
And you were
frankly.
very highly praised for that.
That was
reinforced.
how I received my love,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, there was a lot
That was
of
reinforced.
condition. So another aspect of conditioning is like, how are you receiving that validation, right? How are you receiving the inputs and the signals that you're doing?
How did it get
a good job?
reinforced, right? Like
Yeah.
when you think about like training a dog, you're reinforcing
Here's
the
a
good
treat.
behavior with a treat.
Here's a treat.
So it's not that different with humans, but you might maybe your behavior got reinforced with treats, I don't know. But it could
Well,
also have
if
been
it's potty
reinforced
training.
with, yeah, like I received love when I did a certain thing or
Mm.
acted a certain way, or I received praise, or I had my parent who was usually in a bad mood all of a sudden got happy, or my parent who usually was indifferent about me and didn't care about me suddenly cared about me when I did this thing.
I think as a child, you could take on a lot of pressure or responsibility for your parents' moods. I think
Mhm.
there's an aspect of I need to keep the ecosystem in the home okay, and I have to make
Well,
myself not seen or contribute to that.
I don't think that's inherent in a child's programming. I think they learn that.
Right. No,
That's
I'm saying that's
important.
part of conditioning.
Yeah,
That is
that's
part
important
of
to the
conditioning.
context of that, is that's learned. So this is all conditioning is all learned behavior. That's by definition what conditioning is. It's all learned behavior. It's not something that we're born with. And whether it's subconsciously learned, where it's
Mhm.
not, explicitly spelled out in your face, it may just be kind of like, okay, I learn to be a good member of society by not like chucking something at somebody's head in the middle of the street or something.
That's not really a bad thing. That's not
I
really a
nobody
bad thing.
explicitly had to tell you to do that, but you knew not to do it. But um, there is some like very explicitly conditioned stuff, and I think it becomes very apparent when you're a parent, actually,
Oh, yes.
how you might have experienced conditioning as a child, once you become a parent, and now if you are consciously, if you're attempting to consciously parent your children, and you are becoming aware of the words that are coming out of your mouth, or the mannerisms, the tone, the postures that you're adapting towards your children, and seeing how the effects of that are playing out in them and their behavior, you're able to become aware of like, oh, that is why I acted that way when I was a kid. This is how that happened. Oh,
Well,
interesting.
as you make that shift into parent, you're giving yourself actually this permission now to start to write your own story, create your own way of being
Hmm.
instead of being solely
And
operated by what you were taught
yeah,
to
and,
be.
and it's an opportunity to cultivate and bring your child up in an environment where for us, because we were conditioned to be very obedient, be the good girl and the good boy, and very high achieving. One of our highest values as parents is for us to allow our son to just be fully who he is,
Mm.
and not have to feel like he has to like curtail that, or behave in a certain way, or adopt a different personality for himself than what he was just brought on this earth here to be. And we can see how already like certain things have been shaping his behavior, or how he responds to certain things, and it's very interesting to see that, and to just be aware of that as parents, and use that. It's with kids, it's like you get that immediate feedback, and use that to kind of guide and shape the way that we're parenting him. But going back to what we said, like, this experience that we had is shaping our values as parents as we move forward in this journey with him, and how we relate to him. It's also so individual to him, but we are only able to parent from this place now because we have disentangled ourselves from the conditioning that we became aware of that was present in our past, and
So
still kind of is, but now we're
it
not
is, it is.
now we're not like participating in it, like we're not like, yeah, I accept that, like I will do that thing. It's like I'm not can't think of the right word for it, but like I'm not
Well,
partaking in it. I'm
yeah,
not agreeing
you're
to
not
it.
an active participant in it any
Yeah.
longer in an
Yeah.
unconscious way.
I'm not in agreement with
There
it.
might be something you agree with
Hmm.
that you're now choosing to be your own rather to be something that was
Yeah.
learned, right?
Yeah.
So you're taking ownership over a thing
Yeah.
rather than just doing it because you have a habit of doing it, right? So
Hmm.
there's a different level of intent and awareness
Yeah.
in a conscious thought in a way in a way of being.
Yeah.
So In this case, though, so there's, I think, two primary areas where you're going to receive a lot of conditioning. It's going to be within the home, around parents, family members, etc. And then, of course, the environment. And a big piece of the environment is going to be school.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be school. It's going to be society. It's going to be sports teams. It's going to be coaches, teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So for us, especially being high achievers, where we had been running a program where the more I achieve, the more I am loved, that meant to be as committed to school as possible.
Yeah, and
So,
also the better I do in life,
well, the better I do in school, the better I will do in
or
life,
like
and also the more loved I'll be.
the more secure I will be in my life.
Yep.
Which is interesting because that in and of itself, thinking that the more I achieve, the better I will do in life, meaning like financially, I don't know, whether you own a house or not, how your family's, like the welfare of your life. And also my achievements dictate, how I am living my life, is very indicative of, in and of itself, this underlying program of like, that is what's important.
Mm.
My security in life, the ability to have a regular reliable paycheck, or the house and the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids, like what you were taught was valuable and important in life and ultimately measured your worth, is playing into that. And in our cases, that was what we were taught was valuable and important in our lives, was material things, achievement, security and stability. Like that was a value that was impressed on us.
Those were taught values.
A value that was given to us that we took on as our own, and still kind of lingers around, and we really disentangled like a big piece of that when we made the decision to sell the house and realized that like actually home ownership is not one of our values right now. That doesn't fit into one of our values. We can actually let that go. What is actually valuable to us now that we are in this position is time freedom, location freedom, our authenticity,
thought freedom,
our aliveness, like being in resonance with our environment and like being connected spiritually.
Our sacred connection.
Yeah, it's interesting how you can see that there's so many different layers to this conditioning that you can really get like deep into the weeds with. But I honestly think rather than just sitting down and like trying to layer by layer, like unpeel the onion and like make it a whole big difficult thing, I think probably the best way to go about doing this is just to cultivate this awareness around your life as you're living your life, and as these different situations and scenarios present themselves to you in your life, and kind of having this ability to kind of zoom out and from a third person perspective, observe yourself and the situation that you're in, and recognizing what different programs might be running the show in that particular situation that you may not have been aware of before because you weren't trying to be aware of it. You weren't consciously cultivating that awareness of it. And so these things present themselves to you in real time, which is really the greatest teacher, because you're going through it and you're experiencing it in real time. And now, as you're analyzing the situation in real time, you're able to actually understand why it's coming up, like where the trigger's from, or what situations this is going to present itself in. Reframe this, actually deconstruct the belief, figure out where it came from, and figure out also whether or not that's actually yours or in alignment with your current values and design. And if it's not, you get to toss it out and reinstall a new program, a new conditioning for yourself that you consciously choose for yourself, and then integrate it in a way where now you get to walk forward and live your life with it. And actually, I think that's the best way to go about doing it, because you could get stuck in a big wormhole trying to decondition everything and like think everyone around you is wrong and just dig yourself into a really disconnected hole.
Oblivion.
By doing that. Yeah. Versus doing it in real time and just seeing what comes up as it comes up. And in that case, you're also implementing it into your experience and just integrating it so much more deeply.
It's bringing a different level of experience to the experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Like now they're happening for you rather than just happening to you.
Right. You're learning through the process of
Exactly.
life, and life is
But
going to present opportunities for that.
how many of us lose our essence through the conditioning we've received?
Mm-hmm.
And in your experience,
That's exactly what happens.
how has deconditioning what you were taught allowed you to reclaim the essence of who you are?
Mm. It's everything. It's everything. Like that's what allowed me to get back to it. One of the really pivotal moments in coming back home and kind of reestablishing connection with my soul and my essence was this moment when we were going through the house and decluttering during the process of getting the house ready to sell. And I finally had to face that one like Rubbermaid bin
in the corner
that was in the corner of the garage, like collecting dust and like bug carcasses for years.
And also a husband who nagged her to do something
for like
about
4 or 5 years that I had just put off, and it was all this like all these photos and memorabilia and like sentimental things that my mom had kept at her house for me, and then when she moved said, here, now you need to take this now, it's not mine anymore. And so I finally went through that bin, and I was able to literally see as I went through the photos from when I was like a baby through toddlerhood, through preschool, kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, dental school, see the disconnection from myself that happened in time. And I was able to track like these really, if you listen to the Void episode, they're like snags. These moments in time that created a snag that really held onto like a thread of my essence and held that part of me back, because they created such an imprint on the way that I viewed the world and the way that I acted after that. And I was able to see as I went through these pictures and all this like memorabilia, the times in the timeline of when that happened and the way that my expression changed after that. Even just like visually looking at myself and how I changed. And so it was like a very emotional and very reconnecting, very, very valuable process to do that, to see who I was before all of those snags happened and see like, wow, who I've always known myself to be is actually very different than who I truly was. Because who I thought I always, like in quotations, always knew myself to be is actually very different than who I was, because who I thought I am is tinted by, is colored by my perspective, like the glasses that I'm wearing right now, which are shaped by the lenses were, determined by and changed by those experiences, those snags, and the way that I saw myself. And I put on all these different aspects of my personality to kind of protect me and get me through those experiences that made me believe something about myself that actually wasn't fundamentally true.
Well, some of these snags you're talking about, though, are actually even limiting beliefs that you had adopted from the family. They were not your story, but they were beliefs that you were taught are a part of your story. So now,
like for instance, I can remember for the longest time when I was a little kid, I wanted to be an astronaut.
What kid doesn't want
I wanted
to be an
astronaut because I really like the universe and the idea of just like how big, like where in my mind, this is like as a like elementary school kid, I was like, where does outer space end? Does it ever end? Like, where does it go to? This is the stuff that I was thinking about. And so I want to be an astronaut.
You have a beautiful mind.
And then, thank you. And then I forget what it was, but some kind of like spaceship crash happened when we were around that age in like elementary school or something, middle school maybe. And my younger sister said to me, no, you can't be an astronaut. I don't want you to die. And so that dream kind of went out the window. That ended right there. And then,
Because you had a story of being a good girl to protect your younger sister.
yeah, so that ended. And then moved on. I wanted to be a personal trainer and stuck with that for a long time. Even when I went into like high school, that was still what I wanted to do. And then my parents got divorced in my freshman year of high school. And after they got divorced, my mom, my sister, and I moved out to Pennsylvania. So we moved to a different state. And I had to start over again. That was going into my sophomore year of high school. And that experience of watching my mom go through that and watching what my father was doing and his behavior and feeling that degree of it was almost like I adopted the feelings that my mom was feeling, which was like, I'm not enough. Like I wasn't enough for this person. Because I, as a child at that time with what I knew, extrapolated that to mean that us as a family, like all of us, we were not enough for him. And so it was after that snag happened that I said, I have to be the absolute best that I could possibly be. And my method of achieving that was through my career and school, so that I can protect myself from ever not being enough again. And so it was in that process that I recognized that my shift changed from being a personal trainer is not good enough. It's not high achieving enough for me. Now I want to go and what's the highest thing that in my mind I could possibly achieve? Doctor. It was MD, PhD, dual, MD, PhD. Now I've got the 2 highest degrees possible and I will be forever protected. I will never not be enough because I will have achieved the highest achievement possible.
Because you have a piece of paper saying that you're
right.
Impressive.
And so in that moment, that shifted what I wanted to reach for. And so I set upon a track to get my MD, PhD in stem cell science, and that was what I was going to do. And that I applied for colleges, under that operating system, so to speak, and moved into that next phase of my life in that way. And that really kicked my achievement. Like I was always a good student, but I was not an excellent student until that shift happened where I decided this is what I need to do to protect myself moving forward. Because this is the message that I intuited for myself, like through my limited perspective as a 13-year-old at that time or 14-year-old, took that experience to mean. And so to protect myself from ever feeling that way again, I was going to achieve this super high level of achievement that I thought would grant me that level of protection. And so after that point, it's just like certificate and award and achievement after award in all the different facets of my life. And I'm looking back and I'm like, wow, like this was all, not that it was a facade, but it was all just layers of protection that I was trying to accumulate for myself moving forward. And it was not at all rooted in the truth of who I was and my true essence. It was all built upon this striving for protection from ever not being good enough or being abandoned. And I created this whole world around that and almost conditioned myself into that because of this interpretation that I have of this experience at 13 or 14 years old.
What's so fascinating though is you have this massive experience and this world shift when you're 13 or 14, and then build a whole life based on that experience. But then when I come into the picture and I meet you, you're number 1 in dental school. It's a very difficult place to be number 1. And you're achieving beyond everyone. But where did it end up leaving you? It left you in burnout.
Yeah, because I was also, it left me in a position where I was really good at something I actually didn't like.
Yes. so your battery was drained all the time.
Because my focus was on achievement and building up protection, not on what's actually resonating with me, what's actually in alignment with me, what actually is of my, is an expression of who I am as my truest, realest self, it was, how can I just protect myself?
And you could make the argument that this protection that you had acquired, the armor that you started to wear over the years, began to lead to your ultimate step into the void. Like it
Mm-hmm.
all climactically
Yeah.
led to the void.
Yeah, because it was like I got to a point where I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I really, like, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know who I am anymore. And this is kind of turning into a different conversation. So I think we need to reroute it, because now I'm realizing that we're going into a conversation about like drifting far away from who you are rather than conditioning.
Well, but what I'm linking here is it's tied together. You lost your essence
Yeah.
as you lived the life that you were
Yeah.
conditioned to live
Yeah.
because you were seeking protection for the aspect of you that felt like it needed that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you ended up in this void, this
Mm-hmm.
aspect of,
Yeah.
well, who am
So
I?
let's just go there. I mean, this is also part of deconditioning.
It is.
I mentioned, in real time, kind of disentangling yourself from those programs and patterns as they present themselves to you in your lived experience. And another way, I'm just gonna fix my mic. Another way of doing it too. When I had that moment of going through that bin in the garage, I remember when I was going through that bin, the impression that I had of myself was that I've always been quiet, I've always been reserved, I've always been a good girl, very obedient, but always kind of wanted to like hide myself and not be too big or too loud or attract too much attention, just kind of fly under the radar. And when I was going through that bin and looking at myself, pictures of myself from, let's say, like middle school into high school, I saw myself starting to blossom and come into my like true essence. And it was big and it was vibrant and it was expansive. And I was with groups of friends and like I could see that my light was turned on and I was just fully there and like not ashamed of who I was. And then it wasn't until after that point, after that first snag, where things shifted. I became, you know, much more into a like achievement mode, but I was still very much shining my light. And I was doing so in a way where I was like very open about who I was. I was confident. I was comfortable in my own skin. Like I loved who I was. And the person looking at those photos did not feel that way, did not love who I was at
Mm.
all. I felt very disconnected from who I was. I felt like, how did I get here? I felt very, I felt almost like disdain towards myself. I really didn't like who I was. And looking at those photos showed me that this is actually not who I've always been and not who I was. And this is not my true self. Who I truly am was in those photos. When I said, wow, like I'm so full of life here, that was my actual true self. That was my actual true essence. And it wasn't until I went back through those photos and that whole box that I was able to put the pieces together and say, wow, like I've been wearing a set of glasses that I put on and have been viewing the world through after all these different experiences made me more and more disconnected from myself. And I've been assuming an identity and a personality that I thought was mine, but actually wasn't truly mine. This was just what I had adopted to basically try to get myself through as a result of different experiences that I had.
And you're almost referencing this aspect of like bigness that you possessed. You were willing to be big.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, though, through different levels of conditioning, whether it be even just being in dental school and living and dying by a millimeter or by an arbitrary person's measure of if it was acceptable or not,
Mm-hmm.
had led to an aspect of being small
Mm-hmm.
for both of us, definitely. And that smallness is what held us back and kept us living in a life that didn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no way out for us from that smallness other than through radical honesty and willingness to look in the mirror and say, this is not for us.
Mm-hmm.
And there had to be a seedling of inspiration to remember there is a light in here.
Yeah.
There's a light. I need to go find that light.
Well, because so much of that as you get further and further along in the education system, you go through preschool, kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, then you move on to college. And, I feel like college allows you a little bit of freedom, but it depends upon what career track you're on. When you're on like a pre-med or a doctorate kind of career track, you got to make your resume look
No, you got to be doing
like,
research in your off
yeah,
time.
you literally, like, you almost need to look like Jesus on your resume. Like, you need to look
I could
like,
say some things.
yeah, like you're absolutely just
You have to
living,
be pristine.
dying, breathing, eating, everything according to what you want to do, whether it's med school or dental school, whatever. And you're sacrificing your life to that thing. And you start that in college.
It's an ironic dichotomy, though, because you're trying to make yourself look as great as possible while depleting yourself in the pursuit, very likely. Yeah. And then when you get there, you're not great at all. They're consistently telling you that you're not great.
Yeah. Well, you go from being, when you're going along that track, you're also going from being like a big fish in a small pond.
Yes.
Because now you're like one of the highest achievers like in your college, to now you put all those same people into a pool together, and now you're a small fish in a big pond because everybody's just like you.
The level of disembodiment, though, that we experienced in our professional school was insane. Yeah. It was unbelievable.
So yeah, you go through college and you're going along that track. And then after college, if you're doing some kind of like postgraduate doctorate degree, you're doing another, in the case of dental school or medical school, you're doing another 4 years after college.
And then residency, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And then those 4 years, it's like, it's nothing like what I think it was when, let's say, your father's generation went through. That just seems, from what it sounds like, it sounds abusive, but
yes,
and dehumanizing. But our experience was also very dehumanizing too. And when you're in that kind of a professional school setting, like you are so already through the school system and now through college, and now you're in this postgraduate school, you are becoming so conditioned to follow this certain set of rules or guidelines, let's say, and you are literally tested and evaluated based upon how well you can follow those guidelines. How exactly, in the case of dental school, how exactly or precisely can you follow these guidelines for this certain...
So what's the playbook?
Yeah, like parameters of the perfect preparation. How well can your hands translate these small millimeter-sized dimensions, 0.5 millimeter, 0.25 millimeter, into a tooth in a biological... It's just like, it's crazy.
Well, you're getting taught to fit into the box. It's systemizing you.
You get in so deeply drilled and tested on your ability to fit into a certain set of parameters and how good you are at that. And also, here's 10 tests in the course of 2 weeks. Good luck. Let's see how well you do on all of them.
Yep.
And you're going to sacrifice your life and your health, but here you go, because you got to do it, because that's just what you have to do.
But it's expected by society as well. We're talking about doctorate degrees just because that's our experience, but it's no different than the econ major,
right?
The finance guy that goes and works as an investment banker and works 100 hours a week for 3 years because they're like, well, I got to become a partner.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, when I become a partner one day, I'm going to have everything I ever need.
Yeah. But it's just this idea that, like, the further into the system you get, the more and more conditioned you get, the more and more indoctrinated you get, the more you trap yourself into this way of thinking and being and acting that you have to act exactly in accordance with what you've been told and be very strictly obedient to somebody outside of yourself who is dictating to you and telling you what to do.
Oftentimes the most open-minded people I've met lately are actually like self-led entrepreneurs. Because they're being creative in finding new solutions and they're not holding themselves to a certain story.
Well, so in our last conversation, we talked about how the people who are asking us the questions of how are you guys doing this? How are you releasing everything you invested in this career? And how are you financially willing to let go of that kind of stability? the people who are asking those questions are the people who are in the same field as we are, or very
Hmm.
similar. They're also either dentists or like medical professionals. And so it's like what we're
I've had lawyers
seeing,
ask too.
what we're seeing is that the deeper and more ingrained you get into this, the more conditioned you get, the less you're able to think outside the box and think for yourself and try to open the possibilities to like what could this possibly look like, or even just flirt with it.
Mm.
It's like you become so used to just obeying and fitting into this small box, and you almost trap yourself in it and you feel like there's no way out.
Well, if we were to want to leave people with some empowered solutions,
Mm.
what are some ways
We're
that
doing it right now.
what are some ways that okay,
Follow
yes,
along,
yes, yes,
people, because we're doing it right now.
yeah,
we're doing it in real time.
We're living it. We're making the shift from consumer to creator.
Yeah,
We're making the
and
shift from doctor to entrepreneur.
the reason
we're
that
taking on the risk.
I told Miles after we closed on our house and moved out, I told him we need to be sharing every step of our process as we're going through it in real time. And the reason being is that people need to be able to see this process as we're going through it, because it's very different for somebody to say, I did this thing 5 years ago.
Right.
Versus, I'm doing this thing right now. Here's what I'm doing. Watch me do it as I'm doing it. Because when somebody did something a long time ago, you say, well, it's really hard to relate to. It's like, well, that's great for that person, but they had this, or this working for them, and they were able to do it at a different time than I was. And, they might have had different circumstances than me, and it's just possible for them and not possible for me. But the value I see in us sharing this in real time is that people can watch what we're doing in real time, knowing what circumstances are around us that we're also working with, and seeing these people are doing it. Maybe just maybe I can do something similar too, or even just like dream a little bit of a dream, or flirt with the idea of it, because taking you along for the ride is showing you not only that it's possible, but it's also showing you and giving you a glimpse into how we're doing it.
Mm.
And I think there's so much value in watching somebody do it in real time. And even people, I hope in the future will be able to look back on like these early days of what we're sharing and like extract value from it at some point in the future, because we're sharing it and documenting it in real time, versus a point 5 years from now, where now we're so disconnected from it, it's hard for us to kind of tap back into the mindset that we were
Right.
operating from at the time.
Right. Well, everything we're doing is with a desire to be creating impact and be of inspiration to others, and allow them to know that when you do start playing with the energy of who you actually are, the amount of alignment and you can cultivate in your life can create the antidote to all of the scarcity and fear that you're experiencing that's keeping you rooted in the life that you're living today. So a lot of us, we stay stuck in a life because we're afraid of taking the risk of feeling what it would be like to live the life we're dreaming of, because we don't know what that life looks like. We only have 3 paychecks left. We don't actually know how things are going to go in terms of finances, but we're willing to find out, because you know what? We loved each other before we had any money. We'll love each other after, while we have money. Who knows how it's going to go, but we still have our union. There's a lot of strength in this. There's a lot of...
But it's also tuning into, I know that this has been a calling on my heart for a long time. And it's also been a calling on Miles' heart. And each of us had our own individual processes to get ourselves out of the way. Part of that being deprogramming, deconditioning. Part of that being willing to walk through fear and being okay with that. And a big part of that being cultivating faith. And, we both had these callings placed on our hearts. And I believe that we came together because we were the people to be able to support each other in bringing that calling into reality, into manifesting on a physical plane. And I don't think that happens by accident. I think if you really truly feel like there's a deep-seated soul calling for you, if you know that there is a higher calling placed on your heart, like that comes from somewhere outside of you, it's like a seed that got planted within you. My belief right now and what I'm choosing to lean into is this faith that there will be divine guidance and divine provision along the way for us to make that manifest. And in the past, I've always operated from scarcity, from fear, from trying to create a false sense of security around us. Um, I think this false idea of security really, I mean, if you need an example to kind of show you how false it can be, look at what everybody went through when the pandemic happened. I mean, one of the most secure careers you could ever think that you could have as a dentist, we were out of work for
4 months.
4 months, and we couldn't go into the office and see patients. And, at that time we were on unemployment.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't go in. And everything that people thought was safe and secure in terms of a job and a career, it all changed in an instant. And we create these illusions for ourselves that almost kind of trap us into a way of being. But I feel like, and I'm truly believing and leaning into faith, that if we follow the seeds that were planted within us and within our hearts, things will work out in our favor, and divine provision will be there as we move forward and as we walk forward along the path. And I honestly feel like opening yourself up to possibility and potentiality will just expand your reality in ways that you couldn't even imagine possible.
And we're willing to find out, but how many people do we know that they relegate themselves to living life of a certain experience and existence because they have to pay the bills? We get trapped by this mantra of pay the bills. I even ask patients, how you doing? Oh, well, how's work? Oh, well, it pays the bills. That's the standard we have accepted as a society. That is a societal conditioning that we have received. You wake up, you go to work, you pay your bills, you go home.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no aspect of like, are you living out your true life's purpose?
Yeah. And to kind of build off of that and tie it back into conditioning and our programming, start to get curious about that idea of, is this really it for me? Or is there something more, or something greater, or something that feels more expansive that I'm being called to? Like, can I even just entertain it or flirt with it? You don't have to commit to it, but can you at least flirt with it and see what that shows you? And in real time, your different programmings and limiting beliefs and conditionings and beliefs that have been imprinted and given to you by people outside of yourself will present themselves one by one as you go about that process of just opening your mind and opening your awareness to the possibility of, like, what if life could look like this? Or what if I could be doing this instead? What if this could happen? Just getting curious. These things will come up as you're going about doing that, and you will be shown little by little, layer by layer, what programs are running the show in your life that you can look at and observe and say, is this actually my own? Is this something that I actually believe in? And is this in alignment with what my values are? Is this what I truly want to operate from? Or is there something better, something that is more of service to me that I can choose to put my energy behind instead?
I feel everyone's capable of taking the leap. But if we want to take the leap in a sustainable way, we want to be able to take it in a authentic way. And the only way to do that is to deprogram these programs that are running our life and rebuild a authentic operating system. And if we can rebuild this authentic operating system, the taking of the leap is actually yours and not someone else's. So a lot of times, like, someone might be watching this, be like, oh, well, they're taking the leap, I'm going to do it too. It's like, but is it authentic to you?
Yeah. And
You don't want to be us.
You can't try to do it in the same way, because
Exactly.
you have such a different set of circumstances and different situation in your life that what worked for us is not going to work for
No.
everyone.
No, this is all about getting back to the root of you.
And that was kind of one of the challenges that we faced, is that when we initially looked at our situation, we were like, wow, like there's so much here that, is trapping us, so to speak. We felt very trapped initially by our circumstances and kind of the obstacles in the way of us getting to where we wanted to go. And little by little, we just kept along the path of I know this is what's right. And step by step, things kind of dropped in to our awarenesses to show us the way, and show us the way that was unique to us, and what we had, like us as a couple, us as individuals, very different than what somebody else might have. And the way that's right for us is not necessarily the way that's right for you, but that way that's right for you is there for you.
And it's within
when
you.
you open to it.
Mm-hmm.
When you open to it, and you open your awareness to it as well.
And that's why we're not telling you a playbook. Oh, we did A, B, C thing, and as long as you do that, you're going to go ahead and be able to take the leap. That's not it. It's just about understanding the authentic you and being able to rewrite these programs. And as you do that, having a curiosity and an openness to whatever the universe may bring your way, and seeing what can be born out of the synchronicities that are now surrounding you in your everyday existence.
Yeah. And actually, as you're talking about, I'm just thinking about motherhood and like how much conditioning and programming
this is another conversation is 45 minutes in.
Is really just like dumped on mothers, and really all parents, fathers too, when you enter into parenthood, and how much of that can really feel very stifling and very not good, like unsupportive of us, but we take it on because we feel like that's just kind of like how it's supposed to be.
If you start operating out of what is perceived as normal for a mother, then you're a threat to the idea of what motherhood is. And then society gets threatened by that, and it's uncomfortable. So other people will then try to knock you down. They'll try to make you say, well, that's not how a mother should act.
Yeah. And truth be told, in all of this, anybody who's going to criticize you for the things that you're doing that might be a little bit out of the box or expansive or contrary to status quo, they're not playing the same game as you.
Are you in the arena?
Yeah. It's that classic line. I forget what exactly the quote is, but it's like, I'm not going to entertain the opinions of people who aren't playing in the same
arena
game as me. If you're not out there trying to do the same things as me, why would I subject myself to taking on your opinions and your beliefs when we're not even on, like, you're playing soccer and I'm playing hockey. It's not the same game.
Yep.
There's no way that your way could possibly apply to my way. And so I think we need to also cultivate an awareness of that too. Being able to discern, having a very high level of discernment as to what inputs we decide to listen to or absorb, what opinions we field at all, if any at all.
I mean, it's even understanding the level of development of the person who's trying to offer their opinion to you, right? How much does that person know who they actually are? Or are they just projecting one of their own limiting beliefs or conditioned programs onto you?
Yeah. And doing so in a way that's not judgy, but more so just understanding where that person is coming from and seeing whether or not it applies to you. Like it doesn't need to be judgy or turn into
just
a
pure
I'm
observation.
right and they're wrong. It's just, okay, this is not applicable. It's not applicable to me. That's it.
Love NA. But I think that's probably a really good point where we should start to wrap the conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have any final remarks that you would like to leave the audience with here?
No, I really think we kind of went into it, but then we went
beyond
off of it too.
We
went beyond it. So I really think we're good. And
yeah, I feel very complete. I just wanted to say, our entire motivation with living this life is to truly live life in a way that's authentic and unique to us. But if anyone's watching this and is inspired by this, and you have more curiosities, then feel free to reach out to us. We're always an open book about our experience, and we want to help share as much as we can so others can be inspired to create their own experience. And we're excited to see where things go. But right now, you watch this today, we might be in Portugal by the time you're watching this, and we'll be having a new experience.
Yeah. So see you on the other side.
See you then.